Welcome students to Lesson 8 of the Urban World topic. In this lesson we're going to be exploring the challenges in NEE cities more generally. In the last two lessons we looked at favelas, something unique to Brazil, and how the city has tried to improve its favelas and the life for people in them. In this lesson we're going to focus on social challenges in Rio de Janeiro and why they exist and how they affect people. Please take a moment to write the date, title and learning objective and have a pen and paper ready to learn. Time to review prior learning. Please write 1 to 10, answer the questions from memory and then mark your answers. Game time. The Favela Bairro project aimed to improve quality of life in 35 of Rio's favelas. 2. In Complexo de Alemão, a cable car was built to provide faster transport to Rio's centre. 3. The favelas have been made safer by UPPs, which are armed police units who stay in the communities to reduce gang activity. 4. An urban planning scheme is a government-led project to improve the quality of life of people in a city. 5. The LEP is a solution to the North-South divide. What does it stand for? It stands for Local Enterprise Partnership. 6. What is the main industry creating jobs in the Wharton Enterprise Zone? It is the aerospace industry. Remember BAE Systems, the aeroplane manufacturing company, Britain's main military company. 7. The multiplier effect happens when one economic activity creates many others. 8. What underground train line will go through London and increase access to high-paid jobs? It's Crossrail. 9. What drought-resistant crop is being planted in India and other countries to adapt to climate change? Millet, which, if you remember, has a higher tolerance to hot temperatures and can survive with less water. 10. What island group in Scotland has suffered population decline? It's the Outer Hebrides. Give yourselves a mark out of 10. If you got 8 or more, awesome work. Any that you got wrong, test yourselves on them again in a week's time. To introduce the idea of social challenges in NEE cities, I'm going to show you a photo and some questions. Answer the questions using your understanding. Here's the photo of a classroom in the richest neighbourhood in Rio, Barra da Tijuca. Try and answer the questions. Number 1, what kind of place is this? Well, you can tell this is a school. It provides education to the children here. So 2, how does this kind of place help people? Well, through providing education, it gives people the skills to be able to access high-paid jobs and therefore increase their incomes and pay for the basic necessities that improve their quality of life and standard of living. 3, why do governments invest in this kind of place? Well, it's not just because they care about the children. You should have said that the government invests in this place because when people gain higher paid jobs and start businesses that are successful, they pay more taxes to the government, leading to the government having more money. That's an important reason why the government invests in this kind of place. What other services do government invest in for the people? It's not just education. You should have said they also invest in healthcare and things like infrastructure, sanitation, and public transport, as well as communications like the internet. These are all basic services provided by governments. So the big question today is this: does Rio de Janeiro provide all these services to all of its people? And if not, how bad is the problem? And what problems does it create when people lack these basic services in a city? So, what are the main services that people need in cities? Let's start with that fundamental question. There are many, but I'm going to focus on probably the 4 most important ones that give people the basic needs to survive. The first one is healthcare. When you're born, you have access to a skilled doctor who helps the mother during childcare and childbirth. When you go travelling, you need access to vaccines to prevent you from getting sick. If you get injured or sick in your country, then you go to a GP, a general practitioner, or a hospital, and they treat you effectively. Healthcare is provided by governments in many countries. Consequently, it is an important service that the people need. Additionally, clean water. Not only for drinking, but also wastewater. So sewers are part of the water system of services. They remove waste from people's homes and consequently prevent diseases. Clean water is probably the most basic necessity that people need for things like cooking and general hydration. It's also needed in industry for manufacturing. Additionally, education. Countries do not develop without an educated population. They can't get better jobs, they can't attract investment, crime is high, all of the problems happen because of a lack of education. So education is another key service that a government provides to its people through schools and universities and nurseries, for example. And finally, energy. Principally in the form of electricity, but also in the form of heating and cooling. Electricity powers our economy. Every sector relies on electricity to be able to run. Tractors need energy in the form of fuel. Manufacturing needs energy in the form of electricity. Offices need energy in the form of electricity to run computers, for example. Without electricity, the modern world does not exist. The internet does not exist. And the government is responsible for these main services. So why does the government provide them to its people, aside from those reasons? Well, it's not just because it cares about the people. Government investment happens because it wants to improve quality of life. Yes, it does. Absolutely it does. But why does that happen? The government aims to improve quality of life very often because people pressure the government to do so. In a democracy, which is a system of government where the people choose their leader in elections, where you vote, the people will choose the leader that provides for their people's needs, that provides the best healthcare or the best education, that makes people's lives better. And so the government is under pressure from its people to provide these services, otherwise it will not be elected. But there's another reason. If you improve these services and improve people's lives, then you give them higher incomes, you give them better businesses and more chances to make money, and consequently you get higher taxes as a government. And so governments have two core reasons why they invest in these services. However, it's not just governments that invest in these services. There is also something called private investment. This is when companies that want profit invest in these services. For example, in England, healthcare may be provided by businesses. Bupa is a private healthcare company. You may have heard of it. There are adverts frequently. There are private hospitals run by Bupa which do all the things that a NHS hospital does, but you pay for them. It's a business for profit. Additionally, the government doesn't just provide water in England, it's also private companies like Southern Water in England, which operates for a profit to provide clean water and sewage for people in the UK. It's not just governments that provide education to people, it's also businesses. Private schools like Ashford School in the southeast of England operate for profit. And finally, E.ON, a major energy company in the UK and Europe, provides electricity and heating to people for profit. All of these businesses are motivated by profit, and they will not invest in an area unless they think they will make a profit. What makes a business think it'll make a profit? Well, if the people are able to afford its product. Bupa will not invest in an LIC because people can't afford private healthcare. Private schools won't set up in areas with very poor people because people won't be able to afford to go to them. Similarly, E.ON won't provide electricity to areas where no one lives. It won't make a profit, and the infrastructure to provide electricity, such as power cables, is very expensive. So you have governments and you have businesses both providing services to the people. Let's focus on Rio de Janeiro, our NEE city. But remember throughout this that this affects every NEE city around the world, such as Mexico City in Mexico, or Lagos in Nigeria, or Jakarta in Indonesia, or Shanghai in China. What are Rio de Janeiro's social challenges? Well, there's a core problem that is preventing some people from getting access to the services we've just discussed. rapid population growth in Rio de Janeiro, as we explored earlier in a previous lesson, combined with a shortage of government investment, leads to insufficient services for people as a result of inequality. The new parts of Rio de Janeiro, as shown in blue, and especially the favelas in the north, have received a lack of government investment and rapid population growth, meaning that they are poorer than the rich parts in the south and centre of Rio that have received lower rates of population growth and higher rates of government investment. Consequently, the social services that I discussed earlier are unequally distributed between the poor and the rich areas. The rich parts have better services than the poor parts. Let me show you. This is a typical scene outside a clinic in a favela in Rio de Janeiro. Long queues and a lack of doctors and medicines mean that women and their children get inadequate healthcare in many favelas in Rio de Janeiro. This is just one issue in the city. One of 4 shortages of services provided to people in Rio. So why is there a shortage of healthcare in Rio's favelas, and how bad is the problem? Well, in 2010, only 55% of cariocas, those are citizens of, had access to a local clinic, meaning that they would have to travel very far to reach healthcare. Consequently, the life expectancy in Rio's favelas, for example the City of God, a large favela in the west of Rio, is 20 years lower than the life expectancy in the richest neighborhood, Barra da Tijuca, just a few miles south. That is a significant problem. If you're a child born into a favela such as Rocinha or Complexo de Alemão, your educational outcomes are very different as well. Only 57% of students in Rio de Janeiro completed secondary school in 2010. 57%. However, in Barra da Tijuca, that number was more like 91%. Consequently, there's a significant inequality in educational outcomes between people in favelas and people in the rich neighborhoods in Rio. As a result, if you go into an office in one of the skyscrapers in Rio's central zone, you will find that most of the workers in those high-paid jobs are white, former European migrants. And there are very few dark-skinned people of former African descent, because those people predominantly, which means mainly, come from the poor favelas. So why does this happen? There are a number of reasons, but I want you to imagine you're a teacher looking for a school to work in. And you have 2 options. One is a high-paid private school in a rich, safe neighborhood near to your home, and the other is a poor, low-paid school in a very violent neighborhood in the north of Rio that's far from your home. Which one are you going to work in? Well, your answer is probably the same as most teachers in Rio de Janeiro, and that is the rich neighborhood. Consequently, the schools in Rio, especially Rio's favelas, are constantly understaffed, and so children are packed into very large classrooms and receive inadequate education. As a result of the inadequate education, they realize that they are unlikely to be able to get good employment from this. Not only that, but because of crime, they miss many days of school anyway. I told you in a previous lesson about Mare Favela in the northeast of the city of Rio, and how 35 days of school were missed by 16,000 kids in 2017. That's a common problem, but it isn't a problem in the rich neighborhoods. There's an inequality of education in Rio. Not only that, I want you to imagine you go home as a child and you want to study. You need lights on at night. Or you're a businessman or a businesswoman, and you're running a small textile manufacturing shop in Rocinha Favela. You want to manufacture clothes, you need electricity for those. Well, what's the electricity situation like? Short answer, not good. In 2010, Rio de Janeiro's electricity supply to the favelas was inadequate. Significant sections, up to 10% of Rio's favelas, lacked electricity. And the electricity that it did have was too expensive to be able to pay for monthly for the people who lived in favelas. Consequently, this happened, which you see in this photo. These cables are latching on to the main electricity infrastructure provided by a company called Light, which is the energy provider in Rio, and they steal electricity from these cables. These cables that attach onto them illegally are called El Gato, the cat. They're like how the cat climbs onto electricity cables. As a result of this theft of electricity by people in favelas, it becomes unprofitable for the electricity companies to invest in favelas, since most people don't pay for the electricity. And so the infrastructure providing electricity in favelas is inadequate, or at least it was up until 2010. As a result of that lack of investment, there's also a significant problem of reliability. Much of Rio de Janeiro's electricity is powered by hydroelectricity, which is where water passes through a dam, a barrier, and it spins turbines, wheels, that create electricity. The Itaipu Dam, Itaipu, is the largest hydroelectricity dam in the world, and it provides a significant amount of Rio's electricity. However, in 2009, a drought meant that there was a lack of water behind the dam, and so a shortage of electricity. And so in 2009 there was an enormous blackout lasting 2.5 hours across the city at night. This led to a sudden wave of crime, difficulty travelling, and a loss of business and income in the city. But blackouts are common, and much more common in favelas. People have to deal with this regularly. This discourages investment by businesses that depend on electricity, so those in offices and those in manufacturing, keeping favelas poorer still. So you struggle to get healthcare, you struggle to get a good education, you struggle to have access to affordable electricity. And what about water and sanitation? What's the issue there? Rio has actually done better than most Brazilian cities, especially those older cities, in terms of water supply. It has managed to provide pipes to most parts of Rio. However, there's a problem. Because of the hills in Rio's favelas, extra pumps are needed to supply water up those hills. Rio has lacked investment in sufficient pipes and pumps to meet that water supply. Consequently, you have a small, thin pipe running up a hill in a favela, providing water for hundreds of homes. It's not enough. And so homes have to often ration water, which means they only get it certain times of the day or certain times of the week. This means that children go to school without washing. It means that parents often can't cook. And it means that manufacturing can't happen. Not only that, but the main cause of diseases in the developing world is from waterborne diseases from a lack of sanitation. And as a result of the rapid population growth and construction of Rio's favelas, the city's government did not have the time or the money to build sanitation systems, sewers, that would remove wastewater. So when it floods in Rio de Janeiro after a heavy storm, the sewage leaks out over the land and spreads throughout the favela, leading not only to a terrible stench, but also to waterborne diseases, such as cholera even. Cholera is a disease that was wiped out from Europe many years ago because of effective sewers, but it remains in cities in NEEs like Rio de Janeiro. And so you have these four major problems, these social challenges. This causes great struggle in Rio de Janeiro, and it means that, despite the desire of people in favelas to improve their lives, they lack the basic needs to be able to overcome the problems that they face. Time to assess learning. Question 1. Why would the light company, the energy company in Rio, be discouraged from investing in favelas? Or why has it been in the past? You should have said that it doesn't invest in favelas for two main reasons. Number one, it's not profitable because people have low incomes and can't afford the bills. And number two, when it does develop infrastructure, people often steal electricity using the El Gato method, which is dangerous and reduces the income of the company. Question 2. How might UPPs, the armed police services, improve certain social challenges in Rio de Janeiro's favelas? Well, you could have said that the armed police may improve education amongst the children since it reduces crime rates, allowing children to go to school and get a better education. It also reduces the temptation to join gangs. Question 3. What do you think is more important for a favela in Rio de Janeiro? A sewer system or a cable car? And give a reason. Well, you probably should have said that the sewers are more important for people in favelas in Rio. Why? Because since most people in the favelas in Rio don't go to the center of the city anyway, because they have jobs in the favelas, what they really need is adequate sanitation to ensure their health is protected. That allows them to go to work, it allows them to gain an income and improve their livelihoods. And finally, why might the Rio government have invested more in the areas around manufacturing locations, around industry, than elsewhere? Well, you should have said that manufacturing companies, such as Jaguar and other Brazilian companies, provide an important source of government revenue through taxation. They also provide many jobs in skilled secondary employment. This is important for Rio's economy. Consequently, it matters that Rio attracts manufacturing companies, and to do so it needs to invest in basic services like clean water and electricity. Otherwise, these manufacturing companies won't invest there. Time to embed learning. I'm going to show you some questions. Answer them using your understanding. Go for it, and then mark your answers. Okay, number 1. You need both of these points. 2. Any one of these points. Make sure that you have either of these points clearly as I have written them. 3. Any one of these points. 4. And finally 5. You need both of these points. Really focus on ensuring you've got the keywords that I have written here, whether they're underlined or not. Make sure that you've explained your answers as I have, so say what the problem is and how it affects a place, as I have. Add up your score and give yourself a score out of the total. And if you underperformed, then come back and watch the explanation again and attempt the questions again. If you've done well, fantastic. I'm so proud of you. From the lesson, write 2 questions. Answer them from memory. In a week's time, try and answer these questions again. Next lesson, we are going to be looking at the economic issues in Rio de Janeiro, about unemployment and how Rio has tried to solve these problems. Join me then.